Hello and welcome, I'm your Code Monkey. So here's a super quick tutorial on how to make an error detector in your game. This way, every time your game detects an error, you can show it to the player so they can know that something went wrong, and hopefully they can send you a message so you can fix it. My recent game, Dinky Gardens, is possibly the most complex game that I've ever made. All the machines, all the dinkies, and especially all of the off-world logic, it's all really complex. And because of that complexity, there have always been quite a few strange bugs that I've really never encountered myself, but players are finding. So I implemented this window to help me debug. When something goes wrong, this pops up and the player knows that something bad happened. So let's see how to build this. Although again, keep in mind this is just an error detector, meaning this just detects the errors. It only helps to tell your players that something went wrong. This does not fix the errors. It's up to you as a developer to see the stack trace, see the error, and figure out how to solve it depending on what the error actually is. By the way, the game is actually on sale right now, so check it out on Steam. Okay, so here's my demo. I've got a character that I can control and walk around. I've got a bunch of characters that I can drag and I can talk with them, all really nice. And over there, I've got a button I can drag and change the color. So basically this is the same demo, this simple interaction system. This is what I covered in detail in a previous tutorial. So I've got all these objects, and over there I've got a door I can approach and interact with it. And once I do, and if there we have a nice error, the usual null reference exception. Now over here in the editor, this error is really obvious. We can really just look at the console and see, yep, we've got an error. The game paused and everything. But let's say that this error was left in the build. So here I am running the game in a proper build, and now I go and I do the same thing. So I approach the door and I click to interact with it. And nope, nothing happened. So I did the same thing, and the same error also happened. So as we can see, the door did not open. But now as a player, I have no idea that something went wrong. All I know is I pressed the button and literally nothing happened. This can lead to a lot of player confusion. At least if the player sees that an error happened, they can assume something went unintentionally wrong. So let's build our nice error detector window. Over here in the hierarchy, I have my canvas and set up exactly the same way that I always do. So overlay, scale with screen size, measure the height, and so on. Then inside, let's create a new empty game object. Call it the error detector UI. Let's see over here, let's anchor it on the lower right corner, something like that. So let's anchor it, move it slightly in there. Then inside, let's add the new UI image. This will be our background. Let's tint it something like black. Let's make this one stretch to occupy the entire size of the parent. And now let's actually modify the size of the parent just to get a nice window, sort of like this. Then let's also make a UI, let's say text image. And let's say this is the error detected. Let's put the width and height of 0. These are just visuals. You don't have to follow the exact setup that I'm doing here. I'm just setting up the same visuals that I always use, so disable wrapping and so on. So error detected, let me anchor it on the top left corner and make it a bit smaller. So an error was detected, and then down here, let's say the actual error. So let's put it quite a bit smaller. Let's say 18 error. This one is gonna say some kind of error. Let's anchor it on the left, up, down, and this time we don't want it to actually overflow, so let's enable wrapping, and for overflow, let's put it on ellipses. And now we need to make sure to give it some kind of size, so let's give it some kind of size and position it sort of like this, so in there, just like this. Basically, add the ellipses because some errors are going to be super long, and we really don't want it to overflow down here. And then just for fun, just make it even more clear that this is an error. Let's duplicate the background. This one, let's put it in red, and put it sort of like this. Finally, one more thing on the background, just for fun, let's add an outline. Let's put it in red, and let's say 5, 5, just like this. Okay, so we have our nice basic error detector window. It is very visible. Now let's make a script to actually run this. So let's make a script with the exact same name. So over here in my project files on the error detector, I'm going to create a brand new C# script for the error detector UI. Let's wait for the code to compile. Now let's attach to the game object and open. Okay, so now here, honestly, we really just need to do one extremely simple thing. We just need to hook onto an event. So for that, let's first do a regular private void start. And on start, we can access application. And then there's a nice event called log message received. This event gets fired whenever any message happens. So let's add a nice listener to this event. When this event fires, we're going to get a message with our condition, the stack trace, and then the type of log. By the way, if you don't know about events at all, check out my detailed video on them. Events are super useful. Definitely make sure to learn about them. And if you want to see them in action as part of a complete project, check out my free complete course. Okay, so inside this event, we have all kinds of parameters with all of our error data. But the main thing we want is over here on the type. Basically, this gets called back whenever there's any message, including just regular info messages. In this case, in order to detect an error, we want to just check if it's an error or an exception. So over here, if the type, if it equals either we have an error or an exception, that's when we want to show. So either error or type equals log type.exception. If any of these, then this is when we want to show this window. So for that, let's make some basic show and hide functions. So a private void show, and on show, we just go into this game object, set it to active as true. So we're going to show it. And on hide, we do the same thing, and we set this one just into false. Okay, we have these two, and on start, let's start off with the window hidden. Then when we have a log, if the log is an error or an exception, if so, then let's show our message. Also, one very important thing is since this one is a static event, if so, that means that this won't really get cleared whenever the scene changes and this UI element is destroyed. So if we leave it like this, it is going to cause some errors if we reload this scene, because it's going to basically destroy this error detector UI and it's going to spawn another one. So then the event will be fired on 2 of them. So anyways, that is a big problem. So let's make sure to clean up our events. And for that, since we are subscribing on start, we can go private void on destroy. We can listen to this one and do the exact same thing. So on destroy, we unsubscribe. By the way, here I should say, if you want, you can also just subscribe on the on enable and unsubscribe on the on disable. If you want, that is also perfectly valid. Personally, I just like to subscribe on start and if needed, unsubscribe on destroy. Okay, so here we have this event, but obviously this is just showing it is not actually setting the text. So let's do that. Let's go up here. Let's make a serialized field private of type text mesh pro GUI. This exists inside using the TM Pro. Let's call it the error text mesh, just like this. By the way, if you don't know why I made this a serialized field private instead of making it public, if so, then check out my video on that topic. It is extremely important. So here we have a reference to the text mesh pro, and then when we call show, let us actually update the text. So just go into this one, .text. And we can just say error. Let's print out the condition, which is the error. And then let's print out a new line and then the stack trace. Okay, so just like this, the window should automatically show up whenever we have an error, and it should update the text to show that error. Just over here in the editor, let's make sure to drag our text mesh. So that is this one, by the way, and let's give this a proper name. So error text mesh, and up here, this is the title text mesh. Okay, just giving it proper names to make it clear. And the background top, just to be nice. Okay, so let's drag the error text mesh and let's try. Okay, so here I am playing the game. Let's approach the door and let's press the button. And there you go, we do have our error. All right, awesome. So this is really the absolute basics. It is this simple. Now let's add a couple more extra helpful features. First, let's add a simple close button to this window. And the error is actually a little bit too big, so let's bring this down by quite a bit. Instead of 18, let's put it on 14. Okay, now let's make that button. So inside the error detector, let's just do a simple UI button. Call this the close button. Then inside for the text, let's put just an X. Then let's put it something like this and put the text over here in white. Something like this, make it nice and square and position it over there on the top right side. So let's anchor it to the top right and put it on something like 30 by 30. Okay, that's a nice tiny close button, that's good. Over here in the editor, let's just add another serialized field, this type of type button, which exists inside using Unity Engine.ui. This is the close button. And then over here, let's do it on awake because we are initializing this object. If you don't know why I sometimes use awake and sometimes use start, again, go check out my free complete course. I focus really hard on that course, teaching the correct principles, including when to use start and when to use awake. So in this case, in order to initialize this object, let's do it on awake. So the close button, let's go into the on click. Let's add a listener event. Also, if you don't know what is this syntax, this is a lambda, which is a type of a delegate, which is also something that I've covered in detail in a previous video. So on click, we really just want to hide. That's it, super simple. Here in the editor, let's just drag the close button. And also, just for fun, let's make this window draggable. That is also something that I covered in detail in a previous video tutorial. Here I've got the script that I made in that video. It basically just listens to the onDrag event and actually moves this object. So over here, I really just need to go into the background top. That is going to be the clickable area. And I'm going to add that component. I've got my drag window. And then I just need to assign the rect transform. So that is going to be the parent and the canvas for this one. And for one more tiny thing, let's also add a copy to clipboard button. This is useful so your players don't have to send you screenshots or manually write out the error. So let's just duplicate the close button. Let's put it over here onto this side, make it a little bit bigger. And inside, let's call this the copy to clipboard button. And for text, copy clipboard, make it quite a bit tinier. Here in the script, let's add that button. So the copy to clipboard button. Then in the editor, let's go ahead and drag that reference. And now here, let's do the same thing. Let's add a listener. So on click, let's add a listener to this click. And when we click on it, we want to copy to the clipboard. And for that, we can use the GUI utility and call the system copy buffer. And let's set it to some kind of error text. So let's grab the error text mesh and just grab the text exactly on there. Although this can sometimes fail for some kind of strange ways. So we should probably put this inside a try catch. So catch an exception. If we do have an exception, then let's log that exception. Just do a new exception. Let's say fail to copy to clipboard, and then let's print out the exception. Okay, we're almost ready to test. Let's just add one more tiny nice element. Something that I also covered in a previous tutorial video was a nice tooltip. So here I've got the same tooltip that I created in that video. In order to show it, that class is super easy to use. So I'm just going to go into the tooltip canvas. In order to show the tooltip, and let's say copy error to clipboard. All right, great. So let's finally test all of this. Let's test our close button, test the copy to clipboard, test the window drag, and test the tooltip. All right, so here we are. Let's trigger the error once again. So let's go up here, open and close, and there we go. We have an error detected. And now since this case it's first person, it's actually moving the camera as I move the mouse. Naturally, I would need to add some kind of code in order to stop that. But if I click and drag, yep, the drag window, that does work correctly. And if I click on the copy to clipboard, it says copy the error to clipboard, so the tooltip also works. Here I've got an empty notepad and I paste, and there you go, it did copy the exact code. Okay, great, so far so good. The only final thing we need to test is the close button, and for that there's actually one more feature that we should probably add. If we look over here in the console, we can see the error is constantly being fired, constantly non-stop, it's just constantly happening. So since that is the case, if right now, if I hide this window, as soon as I hide it instantly hides and instantly shows itself. That's because the error is constantly happening. So maybe you want this just in case you want the player to know that it's also constantly happening. But again, this can also be confusing for the player. They click the X and nothing happens. They might not understand that it's actually because it's hiding and showing immediately. So for this, it's probably better just to show the error once, just once per each unique error. So to add that logic, it's going to be pretty simple. We really just need to keep track of all the errors that we've already seen. So for that, let's make a simple list. So a private list of type string, and let's call the ignore error string list. So we have a list of all the strings of all the errors that we want to ignore. Let's begin by initializing our empty list. Okay, great. So we have this, and then down here when we actually show our error, before we do show it, let's check if this error is already on the list. So if we go through the list and we check, does it contain the error text? So let's actually update the error text before. So that just updates the text mesh, that doesn't actually show the error window. So let's test if it does contain the error text. If so, then error already shown. If so, then let's return. We do not want to show it. If not, then we just need to go into our error list and we need to call add, and let's pass in the error text mesh.text. Now, one quick note, if for some reason you don't like the fact that this is storing a list of string containing the entire error text, if you wanted to compact this, you could just compute a hash and store that instead, but really just storing the entire error text string, that works perfectly fine. So this should already be working. And before we test, let's actually test out with a bunch more errors. So let's do a simple input test just to generate some errors. So over here on the plain interact script, this script is the one that handles the basic interactions. So over here, let's add some more tests. So get key down, let's say over the T key. And on this one, let's do a float error. And let's just divide 1 by 0. This is going to throw an error. And let's do another one. Let's say on the key Y. On this one, let's call instantiate and pass in null. Both of these should throw an error. Okay, so let's try this out. All right, here we are, and if we go ahead and try interacting with the door, and there it is, error detected. Okay, there's the nice error. Now if I go ahead and I click on the X, and if there you go, the error does disappear, so it no longer shows. Even though if we look in the console, we can see, yep, the error is definitely still happening, so it is still triggering, but since the error is being ignored, it is no longer popping up that window. Okay, great. Okay, so now if I press the T key, and if there you go, we've got a separate different error. This one did show up because it is the different error. And now I close this one and I press T again, and nope, it does not show because again, we are now ignoring that error. And finally I press on Y, and again, another different error, and it does show up. All right, awesome. So if you want to see this window in action, then check out my game on Steam. Although honestly, hopefully you won't see it because hopefully there shouldn't be any errors. But if there are, then at least the player will know that something went wrong. Now, one extremely useful tool related to this one is Cloud Diagnostics. This is a super useful Unity tool where you really just need to press one button to enable, and suddenly you will automatically be receiving notifications whenever a player encounters an error. This is insanely useful for me as a developer to know when something went wrong so I can see the stack trace. Now I can look at this and figure out how to solve this bug. If you're looking for a more detailed tutorial on this tool, I just had a lecture on it in my Ultimate Unity Overview course in the latest free update. There's also a lecture on a related tool for enabling user reports in your game. For example, you could combine that one with this error detector to send an automated report whenever an error is detected. Alright, so that's the error detector. It's a pretty simple thing that you should definitely add to your games, especially on complex logic games, kind of like my own. So that way, if something goes wrong, at least your players will know that something went wrong. Then hopefully your players will report the error to you so you can fix it, so that hopefully your game gets to a point where no one will ever see this window ever again. By the way, the game is actually on sale right now, so check it out on Steam. Alright, hope that's useful. Check out these videos to learn some more. Thanks to these awesome Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.